A few hours past midnight, I was the only nurse on duty in our tiny rural clinic. We serve 3 farming towns, so nights are usually quiet. The building has 6 rooms, a small emergency bay, and one long hallway that ends at an exit leading to the gravel parking lot. Outside, the wind pushed against the metal roof, rattling the loose sheet metal panels we keep meaning to replace. The generator test earlier that week had passed, so when the overhead fluorescence blinked off at 2:07 a.m., I did not panic. The red exit signs glowed, and a soft hum rose as the diesel generator came online. I checked the vitals of my 3 patients by flashlight. Mr. Rawlings recovering from gallbladder surgery, Mrs. Ibrahim with pneumonia on oxygen, and Carl, a teenager who had rolled his ATV and needed hourly neurochecks, all stable. 10 minutes later, the hum quit mid-note, leaving a silence so heavy it felt physical. The lights died. Only the faint green of the battery monitor on Mrs. Ibrahim's oxygen concentrator remained. I felt my pulse thump in my ears. I knew the oxygen tank could last a while, but I needed power back fast. I grabbed the big flashlight from the supply closet and stepped into the hallway. My boots clicked on the linoleum. Halfway to the generator room, I saw movement at the far end, near the emergency exit. The beam of my flashlight caught a hospital gown swaying. A man walked steadily toward the door, profile lit by the dim exit sign. He looked like Henry Webb, a stroke patient who'd died on Monday. Same gray hair sticking up, same narrow shoulders. I froze. The light shook in my hand, and for a second I thought lack of sleep was tricking me. The figure reached the push bar, paused, and vanished into darkness when my light flashed off the glossy door pane. I forced myself to breathe. Henry was gone and buried. I had attended the brief service myself. Maybe a confused visitor? But visiting hours ended at 10, and the doors lock automatically at 11. I hurried to the nurse's station and picked up the landline. No dial tone. Cell service is spotty here, but I tried my phone anyway. 0 bars. The clinic's internet router has its battery. Its indicator light was dead. Something had cut all communications. A bang echoed from outside, followed by a voice muffled by the door. "Anna, it's me. Let me in." I didn't recognize the calm, almost gentle tone, but it used my first name. Another bang, slower this time, like a polite knock from heavy knuckles. "Anna, I brought what you asked for. I hadn't asked anyone for anything." I backed away until my shoulder hit the med cabinet. Through the hallway window, I could see only emptiness and the faint outline of the service porch in moonlight. The voice came again, closer to the door's seams. "I know you're alone. Open up." I checked on my patients, still sleeping. I rolled Mrs. Ibrahim's spare oxygen tank closer to her bed and secured the valve. If someone cut the outside power, they might be able to get inside too. I locked every patient room door from the hallway side, pocketed the keys, and crept back toward the generator. The maintenance closet smelled of diesel, but the air carried a sharper odor, like spilled fuel. My light found the generator's fuel line hanging severed, sliced clean. On the floor lay a pair of trauma shears from our supply. Whoever did this knew exactly where to cut. Footsteps clicked behind me. I spun and flashed the light down the hall. Nothing. But a low metallic scrape drifted from the direction of the exit, as if someone dragged something heavy across the tiles. I remembered Henry Webb again, how he had stored his walker in a closet after he passed. My heart hammered, but training pushed me forward. I grabbed the emergency toolbox, knelt, and clamped the line. I primed the generator manually. The starter coughed twice, caught, and the hallway lights flickered to life. For a moment, relief warmed me. Then every alarm on the central monitor lit up crimson. All 3 patient doors stood wide open. I was sure I had locked them. Mrs. Ibrahim's oxygen hose lay on the floor, still hissing. Mr. Rawlings' IV pole was tipped over. Carl's bed was empty. A soft shuffle came from the shadowed end of the corridor. Carl appeared, eyes wide, hands bound behind him with gauze. Behind him walked the man in the hospital gown. Henry's face, but his eyes alert, living. He held the boy's shoulder and smiled at me like an old friend. "I'm inside now, Anna," he said, voice matching the one from the door. "You left the side entrance unlatched yesterday when the delivery came. Remember? I did, one careless moment in daylight." "I need supplies," he continued, steering Carl forward. "Scalpels, sutures, antibiotics. You'll pack them, and then we'll go. The roads are closed, but I have a way out. I stepped back into the supply closet, grasped the only weapon at hand, a heavy oxygen cylinder. His smile faded, but he didn't slow. The overhead bulbs buzzed, threatening to die again. "You belonged to me once," he murmured, almost kind. "Back when you signed that death certificate without looking closer." Henry Webb had died of a fentanyl overdose, ruled accidental. I'd recorded the dose, short-staffed and rushing. Had I miscounted? Carl whimpered. The man's grip tightened. The power blinked, my light cycled off, and the hallway dropped into darkness. I swung the cylinder toward the sound, felt it connect with something solid, and heard a gasp and a clatter. Carl yelled, then silence. When the lights returned, the hallway was empty except for a smear of fresh blood leading to the emergency exit. The door hung ajar even though its magnetic lock needed power to release. The power was on again. Outside, gravel crunched, then nothing but the wind. Police arrived an hour later after I finally caught a cell signal by climbing onto the roof. They found the cut fuel line, footprints, and the blood trail that ended at tire tracks heading toward the river road, but no sign of the intruder or Carl. My 3 patients are gone. The official report says they were taken, the motive unknown. I quit nursing that morning, but every night when the lights flicker, I hear a calm voice whisper my name, reminding me that some mistakes don't stay buried, even when the power is... A few months ago, on a warm June evening in Plano, Texas, a thunderstorm rolled across the suburbs and snapped the power to the entire block. Streetlights flickered out, house alarms chirped, and every home sat in sudden darkness, except for the silver flashes of lightning. I was alone with my 8-month-old daughter, Dessa. My husband, David, was driving back from a late shift at the hospital and was still 40 minutes away. I lit 2 candles on the kitchen counter and turned the baby monitor screen toward me. Dessa slept soundly in her crib upstairs, her tiny chest rising and falling in the faint night vision glow. I checked the time, 9:18 p.m., and decided to wait out the outage. Half the neighborhood had already gathered on front porches, calling across the street to compare notes. A few generators hummed in the distance. At 9:32 p.m., a firm knock hit my front door. I grabbed a flashlight and opened it a crack. A man in a reflective orange vest and a yellow hard hat stood on the step, rainwater collecting on his shoulders. His badge said North Central Power, Emergency Crew. He held a clipboard and a small toolbox. "Evening, ma'am," he said, voice steady. "We're doing manual inspections while the grid's down. Your address is on my list. Can I come in to check your breakers?" It sounded reasonable. I had no reason to distrust someone clearly dressed for utility work, and I worried about a surge damaging appliances when the electricity returned. I stepped aside and let him in, guiding him with my flashlight through the foyer. He moved with practiced confidence, first stopping at the living room outlet to plug in a handheld device that beeped softly. "No current yet," he muttered, writing on the clipboard. "Where's your main panel?" "In the basement," I said, pointing to the door beside the fridge. We headed downstairs. I held the flashlight while he opened the breaker box and pretended to study the rows of switches. He marked something, then asked if he could check outlets in the bedrooms. I hesitated but agreed. The sooner the inspection finished, the sooner he would leave. Upstairs, he paused outside Dessa's room, peered inside, and gave a polite nod. "Cute nursery," he said. He never stepped over the threshold, only scanned the walls as if searching for hidden wiring. Something in his calmness made me relax. After nearly 30 minutes of moving from room to room, he said he needed to record outside readings and might return if he needed follow-up notes. He thanked me for my patience and disappeared into the rain. I locked the front door behind him and exhaled, glad that the inspection was over. At 10:07 p.m., every lamp in the house snapped to life at once. The air conditioning unit rumbled, appliances beeped, and neighborhood cheers floated through half-open windows. I smiled, blew out the candles, and reached for my cell phone to text David the good news. No signal. I refreshed the screen twice, still nothing. The Wi-Fi icon was gray. I picked up the cordless landline phone. There was no dial tone. Confused, I walked to the front door to call a neighbor, but the deadbolt refused to turn. The knob spun loosely, as if the internal mechanism had been removed. A chill of realization spread across my skin. I hurried to the back door. Same problem, locks useless. I dashed to the router in the hall closet, thinking a breaker had tripped. Every cable had been severed cleanly and pushed behind the unit. A faint cough came from the baby monitor on the kitchen counter. I flipped the screen toward me. The man in the reflective vest stood in Dessa's room. He was perfectly still, his back to the camera, hands at his sides. Dessa, sitting in her crib, stared up at him in quiet curiosity. There was no thought, only instinct. I sprinted upstairs, heart pounding loud enough to fill the hallway. Halfway to the nursery, I stopped. If I confronted him alone, he could overpower me, and Dessa might get hurt. I backed into the master bedroom, locked the door, and wedged a chair under the knob. With shaking fingers, I fumbled for my cell again and dialed 911. Even without bars, the call connected on any available network. I whispered my address and the situation to the dispatcher. She told me to stay on the line. Police units were already nearby, responding to multiple blackout-related issues. Footsteps creaked down the hall. The handle on my door twitched, then went still. A low voice spoke through the wood, calm and even. "Service check, ma'am. Open up." I didn't answer. Instead, I slid Emily's old wooden toy chest against the door for extra weight and held my breath. The footsteps retreated. Silence followed. No crying from Dessa, no footsteps returning. I stared at the baby monitor feed on my phone. The screen was black. The intruder must have unplugged the nursery camera. Red and blue strobes lit my curtains 8 minutes later. Heavy boots pounded the porch, and officers yelled, "Police! If anyone's inside, announce yourself." I shoved the toy chest aside, flung open the bedroom door, and waved through the upstairs window. Within seconds, officers breached the front entrance. They swept every room. Dessa's crib was empty, but the attacker was gone too. A window in the nursery was pushed up, its screen cut clean across. Officers found tire tracks in the wet grass behind the fence, leading to the alley. In the living room, the drawer where we kept spare keys, passports, and emergency cash was open and empty. David's laptop and my jewelry box were missing. One officer handed back Dessa, who had been found 2 houses down on a neighbor's porch swing, wrapped snugly in her blanket, unharmed and oddly calm. A paramedic checked her while officers interviewed me. A sergeant told me the story matched a string of recent burglaries across Dallas County. The thief posed as a utility worker during storms, cut communication lines inside, and targeted small children, only to distract parents into frantic mistakes. He had never been caught. Forensics dusted every surface but found only generic industrial gloves prints, no fingerprints. Security cameras 2 streets over captured a white cargo van speeding away at 10:19 p.m., license plate stolen earlier that night. The next morning, David and I replaced every lock and added metal rods behind each sliding window. We installed a monitored alarm and wired cameras with battery backups and cellular data. I still flinch when the power flickers during a storm. When I hear a knock after dark, I check official ID numbers over the phone before opening anything. The man in the vest is still out there, according to the last detective who called me. They think he lives on the move, working night jobs that give him easy access to uniforms and tools. I replay the baby monitor image often. How calmly he stood beside my daughter, as if waiting for something I can't name. A heavy summer storm rolled over my city just after sunset, and the power died with a loud pop from the street transformer. My apartment fell into darkness so thick I could almost taste the dust in the air. I lived alone on the 3rd floor of an aging brick building. The only light came from traffic far below, but even that soon vanished when every stoplight went black. Car horns echoed through the damp heat, then the city became strangely quiet, like it was holding its breath. I kept a small kit for moments like this, an LED lamp, 3 candles, and a hand crank radio. I lit one candle and set it on a saucer near the couch. The flame shook with every gust from the open window, throwing long, nervous shadows across the walls. I tried my cell phone, but no signal reached inside the thick old building. "Fine," I muttered, telling myself the outage would end before midnight. About 20 minutes later, a slow, deliberate knock rattled my door. It sounded polite, almost gentle, but in the silence of the blackout, it made my heart jump. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my closest friends lived in other neighborhoods. Still, the thought of another human voice was welcome. I walked to the peephole. All I saw was darkness, so I called out, "Who is it?" A calm voice answered, "It's Mark from down the hall. I've got extra candles and some canned soup if you need them." I had lived here for 3 years and never met a Mark. I cracked the door's chain lock and peered out. A man in his late 30s stood there, holding 2 small white candles and a grocery bag. He wore a damp windbreaker and work boots speckled with mud. The hallway's emergency lights were dead, so only my candle lit his face. He smiled like someone trying hard to appear friendly. I hesitated, but the idea of more candles seemed harmless. I unlocked the chain and let him step inside. The man placed the candles on my coffee table and looked around with casual curiosity, as though cataloging every item. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm Claire." He nodded. "Mark, nice place, Claire Jacobs." The way he added my last name tightened something in my chest. I never told him that. Maybe he had seen mail at my door earlier, I thought, but the feeling still bothered me. The rain tapped hard on the windows. He pulled 2 cans of soup from the bag. No power means no stove, but I thought you might want these anyway. He spoke softly, yet his eyes kept moving. They lingered on the hallway behind me, on the kitchen door, on the locked window latch. The candlelight bounced in his pupils, making them look larger than normal. "Thank you," I said. "I should get back to." He cut me off. "Mind if I stay a bit? It's pitch black in my place. Hard to sit there alone." My instinct screamed to say no, but politeness pinned me. "Just for a few minutes," I heard myself answer. He sat on the armchair as if he owned it. "You live alone?" he asked. "Usually. My sister visits, but I lied. Should be here any minute." He nodded slowly. "Good to have family close." Then, too casually, "Have you ever thought about getting a dog? Sometimes buildings like this aren't secure." I tried to keep my voice steady. "We have good locks." I pointed to the front door. He half smiled. "Locks are only as strong as the wood around them." He tapped the doorframe once, almost like testing it. I pretended not to notice. Lightning flashed outside, lighting the room bright white for a heartbeat. In that instant, I saw something odd. The hallway phone cord that trailed along my baseboard was cut clean, about knee-high, wires exposed like tiny nerves. My landline hadn't worked earlier, but I thought the blackout killed it. Now I knew better. "I should call my sister," I said. "She's probably worried." I picked up the useless phone, letting him see. He followed my gaze to the severed cord and raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "Storm must have done that," he whispered. My pulse hammered loudly in my ears. I set the phone down, forced a smile, and walked toward the kitchen. "Let me get us some cold water." I planned to slip out the back stairs, which led to the super's apartment. The faint light of my candle didn't reach the kitchen, so I felt blindly along the counter for the flashlight I kept there. My hand brushed metal, but before I could grab it, a shadow filled the doorway. Mark leaned on the frame. "No rush," he said. The friendly tone was gone. "You don't mind if I ask? What do you do for work, Claire?" He spoke my name like he had practiced it. I kept my voice light. "I'm an editor. Pretty boring." I inched toward the service door, but he stepped sideways, blocking it without seeming to. "Editing. Nice." He scratched his neck, revealing a long, thin scar near his collarbone. "People tell me I should write my story one day." He smiled again, wider this time. "Maybe you could help. I needed a distraction." "Sure. Let me find a pen." I flipped the flashlight on and aimed it at his face, full beam. He squinted, raising an arm, and I bolted past him. My socks slipped on the tiles, but adrenaline kept me upright. I burst into the hallway, slamming the kitchen door behind me. The old latch stuck for half a second. I shoved a heavy broom through the handle bracket. Wood splintered as he hit the door once from the other side. I ran down 2 flights toward the super's unit, almost tripping in the darkness. Somewhere above, Mark's boots pounded after me. Each echo felt closer than physics allowed. I hammered on the super's door, yelling his name. No answer. The entire building seemed deserted, swallowed by the blackout. I braced for another set of footsteps, but heard only rain outside. Then, faint but clear, came Mark's calm voice from the landing. "Claire, you left your door unlocked. That's not safe." The words floated down like a lullaby turned wrong. I sprinted to the lobby, praying the front entrance wasn't dead-bolted. My sneakers smacked the linoleum. Thunder rattled windows. Every footstep felt like a test of fate. The lobby door gave way with a metal groan, and I spilled onto the wet sidewalk. A police cruiser crawled past, headlights sweeping ruined traffic lights. I waved wildly. The car stopped, and 2 officers jumped out, hands on flashlights. I pointed toward the building. Words tumbled from my mouth. Blackout, stranger, cut wire, knows my name. One officer led me to safety inside the cruiser while the other entered the stairwell. Minutes dragged until the second officer returned, shaking his head. They found my apartment door wide open, candle still burning, but the man was gone. Only muddy boot prints remained, winding through every room like a silent map of where he had stood, watched, and waited. Emergency crews restored power after dawn. My landline could not be fixed quickly. The cut was precise. The super changed my locks and added a steel plate to the frame. I moved 3 weeks later, sleeping at a friend's place until the lease ended. Police never identified any tenant named Mark in our building or the city's rental records.